A short story by Paul McCann. The interview. Times were tough in Downdory and jobs were non-existent. Most people claimed unemployment benefit and somehow stayed on top of things. One of the requirements one had to meet to obtain the unemployment benefit was to provide the government details of 5 job applications that were made every week. So the newspapers advertised a number of job vacancies that didn't exist to enable people to apply for these positions so they could claim their unemployment benefit. The strange thing is, even the government knew that these jobs didn't exist, but accepted the information that was given to them in order to release the unemployment benefit to those who made their claims. And this fulfilled the system's requirements. A kind of bond or understanding was established between the department and the people concerned. A kind of justification arose in these desperate times where illusion had become a way of life. And if you look through the smoke and the mirrors, you could see how silly democracy really was. But each week people applied for jobs that didn't exist. And now and then there were those who applied tact and stubbornness to actually get an interview for one of these positions. Nothing better to do, and with lots of time to kill, Jacko Fahey applied for an advertised position as a social scammer in a large corporation overseas. He had printed off a list of his friends' names and phone numbers who were references to support his application. He also printed off a phony level 2 social scammer graduate certificate from a university that never existed to just show how he had qualifications and skills required for the job. With some of these documents and references, he had letters from the managers of companies that never existed, confirming his experience and qualifications as a social scammer. Jacko was actually amazed that he was contacted by somebody from the corporation to come in for an interview. So, on the day of the interview, he got up early and spent time getting dressed up for the interview. As he drank down a cup of tea, he read through the letter he had received from the corporation and had a bit of a laugh at the spiel laid out on paper. Dear Mr. Fahey, thank you for your application to our current position of social scammer. There are opportunities for promotion to the right person based on work experience and performance and the achievements and effectiveness of the roles played in the daily duties working with the company. Somehow, Jacko had put himself into contention for a position no one had ever heard of. When it was time to leave, Jacko grabbed his briefcase and went off to the bus station. And he waited for the bus to come. No one was waiting except him. After half an hour, a young lady came and stood at the bus stop beside Jacko. She caught Jacko's eye and said, excuse me, has the 89 to the city centre been yet? Jacko replied, no, you know how it is. They're never running the schedule. She nodded her head. She took out a hairbrush from her bag and brushed her hair. Jacko continued the conversation. You look like you're going for a job interview. Yeah, actually, what about you? Jacko said, same. She looked intrigued and said, what kind of job are you going for? Jacko replied, well, it's like a social scammer's position. She checked her watch and said, all right, yeah, that sounds interesting. What do you do? I have no idea. What about you? What kind of work do you do? Me, I'm a line stretcher, stitch catcher, she said. Jacko replied, what kind of job's that? She smiled and said, same as yours. I don't know. Just at that, the 89 bus pulled in. Good luck anyway, and all that, Jacko said as he boarded the bus. Thanks, you too, bye. Jacko got off the bus and headed off into the business section of town, where he found the building where the interview was being conducted. Once inside the building, the receptionist asked him to take a seat. After a short while, the door opened and Jacko was called. Mr. Fahey, my name is Bill. Would you come this way, please? He said. Jacko followed Bill into a room and was asked to sit in front of a large desk. Then Bill sat down and introduced two other people who would also be conducting the interview. They all had notepads and pens in their hand and put them down as they reached out to shake Jacko's hand. Jacko had them summed up in a few moments. It looked as if Bill was in charge. He was a heavy-set man in his late 50s, and he had a beard of colours and a high forehead with receding ginger-grey coloured hair, and his handshake was firm. His eyes looked directly into the depths of your heart. And then there was Jill, a middle-aged lady with a nervous disposition. Her eyes seemed to twitch and look up to the ceiling every so often. Phil was a young man who wore black shades and had gold bracelets hanging from his wrists, and he smiled all the time, even when he spoke. Yeah, Mr. Fahey, thanks for coming in for the interview, said Phil. Jacko replied, thanks for asking. Jill said, we have a few questions for you. Okay, far away. Why did you become a social scammer? Bill asked. I worked as a line stretcher and a stitch catcher for a large company. It was one of my work colleagues who said to me, you know what? She thought I'd make a good social scammer. So I did a little research and then enrolled for a level 2 course in social scamming. After I graduated, I began to work as a social scammer while the people in the local area were expanding their business. Phil continued. What skills can you bring into our organization? Well, I smiled. I'm a highly trained social scammer, and I can adapt to any situation with moment's hesitation. They all made a few notes. If you're successful, when can you start work? Well, I must make you aware that I do have 2 other offers at present, so I would need to weigh up the benefits from each employer before I make a decision of who I would work for. Bill asked, what do you think about government departments? Jacko replied, I always worry a bit about our government and wonder why they don't worry about me. Phil continued, if you had the choice to work for a government or stay on unemployment benefits, what would you say? Jacko stood up and he said, I'd say I want your job. Now, can you tell me exactly what's going on here? Jill replied, well, recently we created a few positions, and one was a social scammer, and one was a line stretcher and stitch catcher, and waited to see what response we would get. Phil continued, 2 people we wanted to speak to about these positions. Bill said, these jobs are real positions, but their descriptions, let's say, a little bit shaky or smoky. The work is, we really need someone to conduct interviews just like this one here, 5 days a week for jobs that don't exist. Well, it doesn't make any sense. Well, Phil said, we need to provide the facts and figures on paperwork to satisfy the system. Your job, if you want to accept it, is to provide names and details, people who you interview for jobs that don't exist. Now, what do you say, Mr. Fye? Are you going to be our social scammer or not? Jacko replied, what's the pay like? It's better than unemployment benefits, Jill answered. Jacko said, Okay, right then, huh? When do I start? Immediately, said Phil. Bill said, "Oh, and if you mention a word of this to anybody, we will deny this interview ever took place. Now, come around and sit behind the desk. It's time for your first interview." They all left the room. After a moment, a knock came upon the door. "Come in," Jacko said. In walked the girl that he had met earlier at the bus stop. "Well, hello again," she said, and Jacko offered her a seat and said, "So you come for the job as a line stretcher and stitch catcher?" "Yeah, that's right," she replied, and Jacko said, "It's your lucky day. You're hired." The end.